We are all shaped by our experiences. From early childhood, our parents lay the foundation, teaching us right from wrong, love, loyalty, and responsibility. But as we grow older, the world around us, friends, co-workers, neighbors begins to shape us in new ways, molding our thoughts and shifting our perspectives, sometimes without us even realizing it. Some influences are brief, passing through our lives like a fleeting breeze, while others take root, deeply altering the direction of our journey in ways we never expected. When Cindy turned 48, it was as though she started to see our life through a different lens. At first it was subtle small comments here and there about change, about wanting something different. But eventually those small cracks began to widen, revealing an underlying restlessness that I hadn't seen in her before. One night, over dinner, she casually said, "I'm so tired of this house. Bill, we should downsize." I was caught off guard. "Downsize?" I repeated, unsure if I'd heard her correctly. "Yeah," she nodded, her tone almost nonchalant. "This house is too big. The kids are gone, and it's just us now. It's a lot to take care of." I blinked, still processing her words. "Cindy, we've been in this house for years. It's our house, the place where we raised our children. Why now?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe it's time for a fresh start. A few of the women at work have been downsizing, and it just makes sense. Less upkeep, less stress." At first, I didn't take her seriously. After all, who downsizes in their late 40s? I figured it was just a phase, an idea picked up from one of her friends that would pass in a few days. Cindy had always been content with our home. It was the place where we had built our life together. This was where our son and daughter had taken their first steps, where we'd celebrated birthdays, Christmases, and every small victory in between. I'd spent years, decades making that house perfect for us. Weekends were dedicated to home improvement projects, building a deck, landscaping the backyard, putting up the garden Cindy had always dreamed of. I could still remember the late nights painting walls, sanding wood, and laying down floorboards, all with the goal of creating a space where we could grow old together. And now, seemingly out of nowhere, Cindy wanted to leave it all behind. Too big, she'd say, too much to clean, too much to maintain. But to me, it wasn't just about the space or the size, it was the memories, the life we had built. How could she be so ready to walk away from all of that? Despite my reservations, Cindy became more persistent. Every few days, she'd bring it up again. "We'll save money," she'd argue. "We don't need all this room. We can travel more, live lighter." But to me, it felt like she was talking about more than just the house. There was an undercurrent to her words, a quiet longing for something beyond just square footage and monthly bills. I'd catch her staring out the window, lost in thought, or browsing websites late at night, looking at smaller homes and communities I'd never considered. I didn't want to admit it, but something had shifted in Cindy, and that shift scared me. The house that had once been her sanctuary now felt like a burden to her, and I couldn't understand why. I resisted, trying to hold on to the life we had built, to the memories that were so deeply woven into those walls. But the more I resisted, the more determined Cindy became. She talked about wanting a change, about feeling stuck and needing something new. Looking back, I should have seen it as the first sign, those cracks forming in the glass, slowly spreading. It wasn't just the house Cindy was tired of. There was something deeper she was wrestling with, something I hadn't fully grasped at the time. I sighed, pushing my plate aside. "Cindy, we've built a life here. The grandkids love coming for holidays, remember? And those summer barbecues in the backyard, how do we fit all that into a condo?" Cindy shook her head, the lines on her face softening, but her eyes were sharp, focused. "Bill, all my friends say downsizing is the way to go. We're wasting time cleaning this place, maintaining it, paying for space we don't even need. We'll save money, energy, and have more time for ourselves." She was relentless. And I was tired. What about the memories? Our neighbors, the garden? Her response came with a coldness that stung more than I expected. "The memories aren't in the walls, Bill, they are in us. And the neighbors? Half of them have moved away or sold their homes. It's time for a fresh start." She gave a slight smile. "Robbie and Mary can host the family gatherings now. And I found a place I love, a freestanding condo. No noisy neighbors, I promise." Cindy's argument had holes, but she was determined, and I was exhausted from months of these discussions. The idea of less yard work, a smaller space to clean, and a master bedroom on the first floor did have its appeal. But this wasn't just about the house anymore, was it? Something deeper was happening. I could feel it. We moved into the condo complex, a cluster of freestanding homes, all nestled together like a perfect, manufactured community. Cindy had been right. It was well-designed, modern, and convenient. The community pool was pristine, and the clubhouse had everything we could need. At first, it seemed like a good change, a step forward. But then, about 5 months in, our new neighbors arrived. Ted and Amy moved in next door. At first glance, they seemed like any other friendly couple. We invited them over for dinner, shared some wine, and within a few months, they'd become our closest friends. But there was something about them that unsettled me. Ted was in sales and traveled constantly. Amy, younger than Cindy by a decade, taught at a nearby liberal arts college. There was a sharpness to her, an intellectual confidence that seemed to enthrall Cindy. At first, it was harmless. Amy and Cindy would chat about her work, discussing literature or philosophy. Meanwhile, Ted and I would talk sports or catch up on the news. But I noticed something changing in Cindy, her views, her energy. She seemed more distant, more critical of things she'd once loved. Our conversations became less about us and more about what Amy had said or done. One night, after another dinner with Ted and Amy, I brought it up. Cindy, don't you think Amy has a bit of a, I don't know, strange influence on you? Cindy looked at me, her eyes narrowing. Strange influence? What are you talking about? I don't know, I muttered. It's just ... you've been different lately. Everything's suddenly not good enough for our house, our routines, even me sometimes. And a lot of it seems to come after you've spent time with her. Cindy's face flushed. Bill, that's ridiculous. I'm just growing, thinking about life differently. Amy's opened my eyes to things I've never thought about before. Maybe you should do the same. There it was again. That same coldness, the dismissiveness. Was this even Cindy talking, or was it Amy's voice coming through her? I felt like I was losing her, and I didn't know how to stop it. Every time we talked about it, it spiraled into a fight, leaving us both angry and distant. But as the months passed, my worst fears began to take shape. Cindy was slipping away, becoming someone I barely recognized, distant, resentful, constantly seeking more than what we had, more than what I could offer. Was Amy pulling her into this whirlwind of dissatisfaction, or was Cindy already drifting, looking for a way out before me even came along? Every day I woke up wondering how to save her from this, or if she even wanted to be saved at all. After an evening of wine and food on our patio, Amy and Ted said goodnight and headed back to their place. As Cindy and I got ready for bed, she asked me a question that felt a little off. Bill, do you think I'm attractive? I blinked, surprised. Of course. You've always been beautiful. Even now, you look like you did in college. You keep in shape, you're stylish. Most people think you're in your 30s. I'm a lucky guy. She smiled, but there was something behind it, a flicker of insecurity. You have to say that. You're my husband. No, I don't have to say it, I replied, shaking my head. I've always been honest with you. You're stunning, and I'm proud every time we go out together. You turn heads. Her smile lingered, but then she hit me with a curveball. Do you think Amy is attractive? I hesitated. It was an odd question, but I answered honestly. Sure, I guess. She's trim. And people always say she looks like you. Remember, folks assume you're sisters all the time. Why do you ask? Well, Cindy began, sounding thoughtful. When we went to lunch today, a couple of guys came over and started chatting us up. It was weird, especially since we were just sitting in a food court at the mall. But Amy seemed totally comfortable, even flirty, with one of them. I raised an eyebrow. Were you flirting with one of them too? What? No, I mean, we were just talking like any strangers would. It wasn't like that, she said quickly, almost too quickly. So why bring it up, I asked, sensing there was more to this story. Cindy sighed, running her fingers through her hair. After the guys left, Amy said she wished she'd given her number to one of them. I was shocked. She just laughed and called me old-fashioned. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. Seriously? That's surprising. Yeah, she continued, her voice quieter now. Tonight, she told me Ted lets her play around when he's out of town. Has she ever come on to you? I froze, not expecting that question. No, I mean, she's flirted a little, but nothing serious. Cindy shifted closer, lowering her voice. What if she did come on to you? Would you want to? I stared at her, my mind racing. Cindy, I'm married to you. So, no, I love you, and besides, I'm sure Amy wouldn't be interested in some old guy like me. Cindy chuckled, but there was a strange tension in her laugh. From what she told me today, I think you're wrong. It sounds like she and Ted get up to some wild stuff. She snuggled up against me as we got into bed, her body warm and familiar. I pulled her close, feeling a bit unsettled, but tried to shake it off as she yesed me. Then she pressed herself against me, her breath hot in my ear. All her sexy talk today got me kind of worked up, she whispered as her hand slid down my body. She began to stroke me slowly, teasingly, while she nibbled at my ear, her hips grinding against my thigh. My heart raced, but not just from the way she touched me. What exactly did she say that got you this worked up? She talked about how thrilling it is to be with someone new, to see a guy you like and just go for it. She said women don't have to wait around anymore. They can take charge. And that turned you on. Thinking about being with someone else. She paused, her movements slowing. As a fantasy maybe, but I could never actually do that? I searched her eyes, feeling something stir in me that I didn't want to acknowledge. But Amy does it, and that excites you, makes you a little jealous. Cindy bit her lip. Maybe haven't you ever looked at someone and thought about it? What if Amy came after you? Wouldn't you want her? I felt a wave of discomfort wash over me. Cindy, I would never cheat on you. That's not who I am. and I'd hope my wife would feel the same. She pulled back slightly. I wouldn't do it either. It's just. Amy makes it sound so thrilling. I thought we could talk about it. You're not mad, are you? Mad? No, but I am worried. Amy's influence seems to be changing the way you think. She's leading you down a path that could destroy everything we've built. Cindy clung to me, her voice softening. Oh, Bill, don't say that. I'd never do anything unless you wanted me to. We were just talking. That's all. I sighed, trying to relax as she pressed her body against mine again, her kisses more urgent now. A part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that this was just a fleeting fantasy. But as she rode me, her eyes half closed in pleasure, I couldn't help but wonder if she was thinking about someone else. Was it me she was imagining or someone new? Over the next few weeks, I couldn't shake the growing concern gnawing at me about the influence Amy had over Cindy. I have nothing against Amy or Ted. In fact, I enjoyed their company. But I could see Cindy being pulled into Amy's world, bit by bit, like a moth drawn to a flame. It wasn't always obvious, but the signs were there, like how Cindy would encourage Amy to talk about her wild friends and the adventures they got up to. Cindy would light up like a teenager hearing scandalous gossip, giggling and snickering at Amy's stories. And it didn't stop there. After every evening we spent with Amy and Ted, Cindy would be almost electric in bed, wild and full of energy, like the stories had flipped a switch in her. As she caught her breath, she'd murmur, "I can't believe how crazy Amy's friends are. They're just so free. They do what they want, no guilt, no shame, and Amy says their husbands understand. They have such a zest for life." The look in her eyes as she said this, that gleam, it unsettled me. It wasn't just about the excitement of hearing something new, it was something deeper. I could feel the pull Amy's stories had on her, and I had to say something. "Cindy," I said one night, as she lay beside me, still buzzing from our latest encounter, "we've talked about this before, but I'm worried. I'm not like Amy and Ted, and you know that. I love you, but you seem to be getting drawn in by their lifestyle. Are you? Are you still happy being my wife?" Her eyes widened at the question, and for a moment, I could see something flicker across her face. Doubt? Confusion? But then she quickly said, "What? Yes, of course. I love you with all my heart. It's just exciting to think about, that's all." Doesn't the idea of being with someone like Amy or some other sexy woman ever excite you, as a fantasy? I sighed, trying to keep my frustration in check. "Cindy, I'm not a prude. Sure, I have fantasies, but I don't fixate on them. You're still the girl of my dreams, the woman I want. I don't have any desire to be with anyone else." She smiled softly and snuggled into me, whispering, "You're the best." 3 weeks later, we were at one of the Friday night pizza parties by Clubhouse. The social committee organized these events for the residents, a casual night of food, drinks, and dancing. This particular night, around 75 people showed up. The tables were laid out with pizza, salads, and desserts, and a bartender was serving generously poured drinks. There was even a small dance floor set up on the patio, with music playing from a couple of decent speakers. I was sitting with Ted, discussing the weekend's upcoming games while enjoying a gin and tonic. Cindy was off chatting with the ladies who had organized the event. Amy approached our table with that confident, easy smile she always had. "Okay," she said with a playful grin, "are one of you going to dance with me, or do I need to find someone else?" I glanced at Ted, expecting him to get up, but he just smiled and gestured toward me. "Go ahead, she's all yours." I didn't want to be rude, so I stood up. Amy grabbed my hand, leading me to the dance floor with a sway in her hips that was impossible not to notice. The music shifted to a slow song, and she stepped into my arms, pressing her body against mine. For a moment, it felt innocent enough, just a dance between friends. But then she leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear. "Thank you for not turning me down," she whispered. "Ted's not much of a dancer, but he doesn't mind when I dance with other men." "Really?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Even when you're out somewhere nice? Doesn't it bother him if strangers ask you to dance?" She chuckled softly, her voice low. "No, he likes it. He sees it as a compliment. He says it's flattering that other men notice me." I hesitated. "And when those men want more than just a dance?" Amy pulled back slightly to look into my eyes. "Well, that depends on who's asking," she said, her tone flirtatious. "Most of the time, I laugh it off and go back to Ted, but not always." Her words hung in the air, and I couldn't help but feel her press herself a little closer, her hips grinding against me just enough to blur the line between playful and suggestive. I could feel her breath quicken as she added, "Ted's pretty understanding. We both make new friends now and then." I cleared my throat, my mind racing. "And how do you feel about Ted making new friends?" She smiled, a gleam in her eye. "I think Cindy's already told you we have a more modern view on things." Her voice dropped lower. "But I don't think Cindy is interested in that, yet." The song ended, and I stepped back, forcing a smile. I leaned in and kissed her on the forehead, trying to keep things light. "Thanks for the dance and the info," I said before turning and heading back toward the table. When I returned, Cindy and Ted were laughing together about something. Ted looked up at me, She let you go already, he joked. Yeah, I replied, trying to keep my tone casual. Needed another drink. You guys want anything? I grabbed another round of drinks and returned to the table. Cindy patted my leg as I sat down. Amy was just telling me she has an event at the college on Wednesday night. She invited me to go with her. It's a lecture by the Dean of Women's Studies. Sounds interesting. I raised an eyebrow. Glancing at Ted, he shrugged and said, Sounds fun. Bill, maybe we can check out that new barbecue place while they're at the lecture. Boys' night. Later that week, as Cindy and I were winding down, she mentioned the event again. There's a reception after the lecture, she said, so I might be home pretty late. Okay, I replied. Do you need me to pick you up? No, Annie's calling an Uber for us. I hesitated. Is it a women-only lecture? She looked at me, amused. No, there will be men there. Mostly faculty, I think, and a few sponsors. Why do you ask? Just curious why Amy invited you instead of Ted. Cindy smiled, brushing off the question. Not sure. Maybe she thinks I'll enjoy making some new friends. That last phrase, making some new friends, set off alarms in my head. I wasn't sure if Cindy realized what she was saying, or if Amy had already planted the seed. But as she spoke about the event, my mind raced with worry. I had no reason to suspect anything unusual, so I decided to let it go. Barbecue with Ted was fine, but my mind kept drifting back to Cindy. By 9:30 I was feeling restless, and by 10:00 I was in bed, though I couldn't shake the unease that had settled in my gut. At 1:15 a.m. I woke up groggy and disoriented, and noticed that Cindy still wasn't home. I got up, used the bathroom, and was about to climb back into bed when I heard a car pull up outside. Curious, I walked over to the window and peeked out through the blinds. It wasn't an Uber, it was a limo. 2 doors opened, and 2 guys stepped out, both wearing white dress shirts, but no ties or jackets, looking like they'd come from some fancy party. As they stood on either side of the car, Amy and Cindy emerged, Amy on one side, Cindy on the other. My stomach dropped. Amy was laughing loudly, holding a bottle of something that sloshed dangerously in her hand as she stumbled into the guy who helped her out of the car. He caught her, and without missing a beat, she kissed him hard. Her body language said it all. This wasn't new. She clung to him, deepening the kiss, then pulled away only to shove the bottle into his hands and throw her arms back around his neck for another long, lingering kiss. But my eyes weren't on Amy. Cindy was standing on the other side of the limo, a little more composed, but still looking far too comfortable with the man beside her. She leaned in, kissing him on the cheek as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I couldn't hear what she said, but they both looked over at Amy and her companion, laughing softly. Then, to my horror, Cindy pointed toward our garage and pressed the button on her key fob to raise the door. I stood frozen, unable to move as I watched Cindy take a step toward the house, but the man wasn't letting go of her hand. He pulled her back into his arms, and for a split second, I thought she would resist. I hoped she would resist. But then, like a slow-motion nightmare, she hesitated only for a moment before she melted into him. He kissed her deeply, and my heart shattered as I saw her respond, leaning into him, returning his kiss as if it was something she'd wanted all night. I couldn't watch anymore. I turned away, my stomach churning, and walked back to the bedroom. I closed the door, locked it, and then, needing anything to keep her out, I dragged a chair over and wedged it under the doorknob. A few minutes later, I heard the garage door close. I stayed in bed, listening to the muffled sounds of Cindy moving around downstairs. Then, the unmistakable sound of her trying the bedroom door. It jiggled once, then again. I imagined her surprise. We never closed that door, much less locked it. What was she thinking, I wondered, as she stood there, locked out of her own bedroom, her own marriage? I lay awake most of the night, the weight of what I'd seen pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket. My mind raced, replaying the scene over and over, trying to figure out what had gone wrong, how we had gotten here. Morning came too soon. I forced myself out of bed, moving on autopilot. There was no sign of Cindy downstairs, and I assumed she'd slept in one of the spare rooms upstairs, hiding from the confrontation we both knew was coming. I grabbed my keys, charged the garage door, and got into my car, the cold silence of the house following me as I drove away, leaving everything unresolved. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Cindy. Cindy, I'm sorry I was so late, but I did warn you. Why did you have the bedroom door locked? I had to sleep upstairs. Why didn't you wake me this morning? I stared at the screen, the words swimming in front of me. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I knew what I saw last night, Cindy, kissing that man in our driveway, but I didn't know if that kiss was the extent of it, or if it had gone much further. I needed time to figure things out before I could even think about talking to her. The rest of the day at work was a blur. I was useless. I sat at my desk, barely making it through a few emails and phone calls. My mind kept wandering back to the scene outside my house, and the haunting possibility of what might have happened before they got out of that limo. Did she cross a line? Or was it just a drunken kiss? The uncertainty gnawed at me. At one point, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I picked up my phone and called Ted. "Ted," I said, my voice tight, "do you know anything about what the ladies were up to last night?" He sounded confused. "No, man. Cindy crawled into bed late, but I didn't talk to her. I figured she was tired from the lecture." "Why? What's going on?" "I'm not even sure there was a lecture," I said slowly, weighing my words. "I think maybe our wives didn't tell us the whole story." "What do you mean?" Ted asked, his tone sharpening. "You think they skipped the lecture?" "Maybe," I replied. "Or maybe they went to the reception and then met up with some guys afterward. I know something happened. Ted, you should ask Amy, see if she says anything." Ted was quiet for a moment. "Okay, buddy, I'll ask her, but I'm sure it's nothing. You've talked to Cindy, right?" "No," I said, my voice low. "Not yet. I need to process this before I confront her." After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't sure what I wanted Ted to find out, but I knew I couldn't sit in the dark much longer. Ted confronts Amy. Later that afternoon, Ted walked into the house, still mulling over my call. He found Amy lounging on the couch, her phone in hand, a glass of wine already on the table beside her. "Amy," he said, keeping his tone even, "I just got off the phone with Bill. He asked if there was even a lecture last night, or if you two were just out messing around." Amy glanced up at him, her expression amused. "Of course, there was a lecture. It was followed by a reception, and then we went out for drinks with a couple of sponsors. What's the big deal?" Cindy had a great time. She finally let loose for once. Ted's patience snapped. "Oh my fucking god, Amy, you stupid bitch. I told you not to fuck with them. Bill is not like us. If he finds out what really happened, he's going to lose it. Please tell me you didn't let Cindy do something stupid." Amy rolled her eyes, clearly not understanding the gravity of the situation. "Relax, Cindy didn't do anything. She didn't fuck anyone, okay? But she sure loved watching me get fucked. I told you she was curious. She just needs a little more time, and she'll get Bill on board too. Can you imagine? 2 new playmates right next door." Ted ran his hands through his hair, pacing as his frustration mounted. "Are you out of your fucking mind? Bill's not like that. He's never going to be part of this. And now you've put everything at risk. I like living here, Amy, I like them, and you had to go and mess it all up." Amy blinked at the sudden outburst, clearly taken aback by Ted's anger. Okay, what do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Ted stopped pacing and stared her down. "You need to call Cindy and get your story straight. Bill knows something's off, and you better figure out how to cover this up before it all blows up in our faces." Amy frowned, her mind racing. How could he know? There's no way he saw anything. The place we went is private, high security. No one could have seen us there. The limo dropped us off, and then they left. Ted stared at her, his eyes narrowing. "Let me guess. You said goodbye in the driveway, didn't you?" "Jesus, Amy, right in front of his house." Amy hesitated. It was late. Ted, like 1:30. There's no way anyone was watching. Ted shook his head, anger rising again. Unless Bill was awake, waiting for Cindy to come home, which is exactly the kind of thing someone like him would do. Amy's face paled as the realization sank in. Fuck. Okay, I'll call Cindy right now. As Amy picked up her phone, Ted sat down, feeling the weight of what had happened settle over him like a cloud. If Bill had seen even a fraction of what happened last night, there'd be no salvaging this. And no matter how hard they tried to spin the story, there was no escaping the truth forever. Meanwhile, as I sat in my office, staring at Cindy's unread text, I could feel the walls closing in. Whatever had happened that night, it wasn't just a kiss. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to face the truth of what came next. My assistant, Carol, stuck her head into my office around noon, breaking me from my spiraling thoughts. "Knock knock, are you sleeping in here? I haven't heard a peep out of you all day. Is everything okay?" I forced a weak smile. "No, Carol, everything is not okay, but it has nothing to do with work." Concern creased her face as she stepped in and closed the door behind her. "Bill, what is it? I've never seen you like this. Are you sick? How can I help?" Carol had always been a steady presence in the office, and today she sounded almost maternal, her voice laced with worry. I appreciated the concern, but this wasn't something anyone could help with. "I think Cindy has gotten herself into some trouble," I said, hesitating for a moment before continuing, "and I'm not sure how much damage has been done." "Trouble? What kind of trouble?" she asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Her new best friend, Amy, our neighbor, has been pulling her into something. Amy and her husband have an open marriage, and Cindy's been, well, fascinated by their lifestyle. They went to some women's lecture last night, and afterward they didn't come home until 1:30 in the morning. They were in a limo with 2 guys, and I saw Cindy kissing one of them in our driveway. It wasn't just a friendly peck, either. It was intimate. Carol's eyes widened in shock. Oh my God, Bill, a kiss? A long kiss in the driveway? That's not good. Yeah, I muttered. I don't know what else happened, if anything, but that kiss was enough to shake me. I'm trying to figure out what to do. Carol shook her head, sympathy written all over her face. So, what are you going to do? I'm going to confront her tonight, I said, feeling the weight of the words settle in my chest. If she slept with that guy, it's over. If it was just the kiss. I don't know. I really don't. I didn't know exactly how I was going to bring it up when I got home, but as I walked through the door that evening, Cindy was already waiting for me. She handed me a drink and asked me to sit with her on the couch. Bill, I need to tell you something, she began, her voice shaky but composed. I think you may already know what I'm about to say, but you deserve the whole story. I didn't say a word. I just nodded, waiting. As you know, I went to the lecture with Amy last night, she started, fiddling nervously with her hands. After the lecture, there was a reception for some of the college's big donors. Amy wanted to mingle with them and asked me to help. I danced with a few older guys, flirted a bit, and accepted drinks from some of the younger ones. It was fun, Bill, I felt. Special. These men were rich, charming, and they were vying for my attention like I was the belle of the ball. She paused, glancing at me to gauge my reaction. I stayed quiet, letting her continue. As the night went on, two of the men stuck close to us. We chatted, danced some more, and eventually they invited us for a nightcap at their condo. I know how this sounds, but it felt harmless at the time. We rode to their place in the limo, had some champagne, and sat by the fireplace. I paired off with a guy named Paul, and we got cozy, but it was just talking at first. She took a deep breath. He kissed me a couple of times, and I let him. I didn't stop him right away. It was fun, Bill, and exciting. But when he tried to take things further, I stopped him. I didn't sleep with him, I swear. Her words hung in the air, heavy and loaded. Amy and her guy, Steve, well, they got a lot more physical. I could tell Paul expected me to do the same, but I didn't. I told Amy we needed to go, and the limo took us home. When we got back, Amy was drunk, and her goodbye turned into a full make-out session with Steve in front of our house. I gave Paul a peck on the cheek, but he pulled me in for a deeper kiss. I kissed him back. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. Cindy looked down, clearly ashamed. When I found the bedroom door locked, I realized you probably saw everything. I'm so sorry, Bill. I stared at her for a moment, processing everything she had said. So you're sorry I saw you kissing some guy in our driveway? Yes, of course, she replied quickly, her voice trembling. I couldn't help the anger that flared up in me. Funny, it sounds like you regret me seeing you, but you don't actually regret doing it. That's not what I meant, Cindy said defensively. But the truth is, kissing him wasn't a big deal. It was fun, but I didn't let him take it too far. It was just a fun evening. I felt my blood boil. What I saw was definitely not fun for me. Cindy, I watched my wife make out with another man in our driveway. That's not fun, it's a betrayal. You absolutely did take it too far. Her expression shifted, a flash of irritation crossing her face. Bill, be reasonable. So I kissed a guy a few times. I had a good time. I didn't sleep with him. What's the harm? The harm, I said through clenched teeth, is that I don't want my wife kissing other men. I don't want her going to their homes for drinks, flirting, and doing God knows what else. That's not how a marriage works. Cindy's frustration boiled over. Grow up, Bill. It's 2023. I'm a grown woman, and I can make my own choices. What the hell does that mean? I asked, my voice rising. Are you saying you want the freedom to kiss and flirt with other men? What's next, sleeping with them? She crossed her arms defiantly. I haven't slept with anyone, but if I wanted to, that's my choice. I'm not some possession of yours. Bill, you don't get to dictate who I kiss or where I go. I stared at her, stunned by the words coming out of her mouth. So, what? You want an open marriage now? Like Ted and Amy? Cindy's jaw tightened. Maybe if you'd loosen up a little, you'd see that kind of freedom could work for us too. I stood up slowly, my entire body shaking with anger. Loosen up? You want me to stand by and watch you run around with other men? That's not freedom. Cindy, that's the end of our marriage. Her face twisted in frustration as she lashed out one final time. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if you could pull that stick out of your ass. I stared at her for a long moment, burning her angry, defiant face into my memory. It's obvious you've decided to adopt Amy's concept of marriage, I said, my frustration bubbling over. Well, let me be clear, that is completely unacceptable to me. And as you said earlier, you don't own me. You don't get to tell me how to live my life. I don't have to put up with your bullshit. Cindy's face twisted in confusion. What the hell does that mean? It means, I continued, my voice steady but firm, I reject this so-called open marriage. I won't live in a sham of a marriage where my wife cheats and calls it freedom. She stared at me, disbelief flashing across her face. So what? Rather than expand your mind a little, you're going to divorce me. That's insane. Bill, we love each other. We've raised kids together. We belong together. You can't divorce me. I shook my head, struggling to find a way to make her understand. Okay, let's try this. What if I told you I was going to start buying puppies to roast, and that's what we'd be eating from now on? Her face twisted in horror. That's sick. What the hell is wrong with you? I leaned in, my voice sharp. There, right there. That feeling of disgust and revulsion you just had, that is how I feel about this open marriage crap you're pushing on me. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open, slowly shaking her head, but I could see it now. Finally she understood. That sick feeling, the imagery of something so repulsive, had cracked through her defenses. Okay, Bill, she whispered, her tone more subdued now. Amy convinced me you'd eventually agree. I actually thought it might have been fun, but it's not worth ending our marriage over. I guess I just thought you were being stubborn. But that stuff you said about the puppies. God, yuck. I crossed my arms, not letting up. Cindy, you let Amy's ideas get inside our marriage. You stopped thinking about what was best for us and started doing what you wanted. Even though you knew it hurt me. For the last 2 decades, we've been partners, working together for a better life. But now, thanks to Amy, you've cheated. You're trying to convince me to let you keep cheating. Bill, please, she said, her voice cracking. I see that now. I should never have pushed Amy's ideas on you. I was being selfish. Please forgive me, and let's go back to how it used to be, just you and me. I sighed, the weight of years of trust and love pressing down on me. I don't know if I can. Cindy, I'm not sure I can trust you. That's a real problem. You fooled around with another guy and clearly enjoyed it. Now that you know I won't agree, you claim it's over. How do I know you're not just saying that to keep me around while you sneak around behind my back? Tears welled in her eyes. No, baby, I swear. I've seen the light. I know I was wrong. Please, give us another chance. I closed my eyes and sighed deeply. After 20 years, I guess I owe it to you, to us, to not just give up. But remember, this is a two-way street. You have to work just as hard as I do. No more talk of an open marriage. It's just you and me, no one else. Agreed? Yes, baby, I promise. It's just you and me from now on. Over the next several months, Cindy made it her mission to prove to me that she was committed to our marriage. It wasn't just small gestures, either. She changed her entire routine. She stopped hanging out with Amy entirely. In fact, she didn't even mention her name anymore, as if wiping her from our lives would somehow erase everything that had happened. Cindy started spending more time at home. She made sure she was always there when I got back from work, cooking dinner, asking about my day, and finding ways to reconnect. Sometimes she'd plan quiet evenings for us, like movie nights or weekends away, just the two of us. She even suggested marriage counseling, but I wasn't ready for that. Still, her efforts weren't lost on me. We distanced ourselves from Amy and Ted, slowly at first, then completely. They still lived next door, but we only saw them in passing or at larger neighborhood gatherings where it was easy to avoid real conversation. I missed hanging out with Ted, honestly. We'd had some good times over the years, watching games, having beers, shooting the breeze, but keeping Amy away from Cindy was a priority. It felt like keeping poison away from something fragile and still healing. At community events, Cindy and I would stick close together, a united front. If Amy came near us, Cindy would subtly steer me in another direction, almost as if she could feel my discomfort before I even said anything. Ted was polite but distant. He knew something was off, but we never addressed it. He would occasionally catch my eye, a hint of guilt behind his gaze, but we both let it slide. For a while, things really did feel like they were getting back to normal. Cindy was more attentive than she had been in years. She was trying to rebuild the trust we had lost, and I wanted to believe her. I really did. We'd been through so much together, raised kids, built a life. It seemed like maybe, just maybe, we were finding our way back. But even as things appeared to be mending on the surface, there was always this nagging doubt in the back of my mind. I tried to silence it, convincing myself that Cindy had changed, that she had learned from her mistakes. But trust, once shattered, doesn't come back easily. There were nights when I'd lie awake, replaying everything that had happened, wondering if I was being naive for letting her back in. I'd think about that kiss in the driveway, the way she had melted into that man's arms, and my stomach would churn with anger and betrayal all over again. And yet, every time I saw her putting in the effort, smiling at me like she used to, laughing at something silly I'd said, I'd push those doubts aside. I wanted to believe we were on the right path. I needed to believe it. 2 years later, we were at another community event, and I got roped into manning one of the grills. Next to me was a new neighbor I hadn't met before. "What's hot standing next to this thing?" I said, cracking open a beer and handing one to him. "I'm Bill Carter, by the way," I added, sticking out my hand. "Jim Rowland," he said, clasping my hand with a firm shake. We chatted as we worked the grill, swapping stories about the neighborhood. At one point, I heard Amy squeal with laughter as one of the kids chased her with a squirt gun. Jim looked up, his eyes following her. Boy, that Amy is something, isn't she? Jim said with a chuckle. Yeah, I said cautiously. She's quite the character. I see her at the Fremont pretty often, he continued casually. My company hosts events there every week. You know, a free lunch if you listen to a sales pitch. She and her friend Cindy really know how to work a room. My beer almost slipped from my hand. Cindy, I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Yeah, I guess she lives near Amy, older but still a real looker. The two of them are always the center of attention. Some of the guys say Amy's always looking for fun. And Cindy, well, she's a bit of a cougar, likes the younger crowd. I froze, barely hearing the rest of what Jim said. My heart pounded in my chest. I thanked him for his help, passed off the grill duty, and walked home in a daze, my mind racing. Cindy had gone back to Amy, back to that life, after everything we'd gone through. I was still sitting in stunned silence when Cindy came home, her voice calling out to me. Bill? Are you here? Everything okay? She walked into the room, stopping when she saw me. Honey, are you sick? I raised my head slowly, my voice calm but laced with betrayal. How long? She blinked, confused. What do you mean? How long did it take for Amy to lure you back into her lifestyle? Her eyes widened, but she quickly tried to cover it up. I don't know what you're talking about. The Fremont Lounge, I said coldly, where you and Amy have been spending your time making new friends. Her face paled. Oh shit. We're done, Cindy, over. There's no use lying about it now. Just tell me when it started. She hung her head, guilt flooding her features. A few months ago. Amy called me, invited me to lunch. Afterward, some younger guys bought us drinks. It just sorta happened. I'm sorry, Bill. 3 months later, our house was on the market, and it sold faster than I'd expected. The real estate agent called it a quick win, but it didn't feel like a victory. Walking through those empty rooms one last time was harder than I'd anticipated. Every corner was a reminder of something: our kids' bedrooms, the dining table where we'd hosted countless family dinners, even the patch of wall where Cindy and I had once measured the kids' heights as they grew. Now it all seemed irrelevant. Just things, just space. The day we signed the final papers, I sat across from my lawyer, a man I barely knew before this process started but had come to rely on. His office was impersonal beige walls, framed degrees, and the subtle scent of coffee. Cindy was with her lawyer in another room. We hadn't spoken since the house sold, and part of me was relieved. My lawyer, Mr. Greer, handed me the final divorce papers, his voice steady, as if this was just another day at the office. All you need to do is sign here, Bill, then it's done. I stared at the papers, the weight of 2 decades crammed into a few sterile pages, 20 years reduced to legal jargon and signatures. Mr. Greer gave me a sympathetic look. You okay? I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure if I was. Yeah, I murmured, my voice feeling distant even to me. Just strange. He paused, studying my face. It always is, but you're doing the right thing for yourself. I glanced down at the papers again, seeing Cindy's name next to mine, one final time, before our lives officially split. You know, I said, trying to make sense of it all, we built a whole life together. Kids, memories, a house we thought we'd grow old in, and now it all boils down to this. Just signatures. Mr. Greer leaned back in his chair. Divorce has a way of making everything feel smaller, more technical. It's the emotional side that lingers long after the paperwork is done. I took a deep breath, grabbed the pen and signed. My hand felt heavy, like it was dragging the weight of those 20 years across the page. When I was done, I slid the papers back to him, feeling a strange hollowness in my chest. That's it, huh? I asked, almost to myself. That's it, he said, gathering the documents, stacking them neatly. You're officially a free man. Free, the word sounded strange, almost foreign. For the first time in over 2 decades, I was no longer married. I stood up, the weight of it all slowly sinking in, the realization that my life, as I'd known it, had truly ended. As I left the office, the feeling of hollowness clung to me. The world outside seemed normal: cars passing by, people hurrying along the sidewalk. But for me, everything felt off. I sat in my car for a while, just staring at the steering wheel, unsure of what to do next. My phone buzzed, a text from Cindy. Cindy, the papers are signed. It feels weird. I'm sorry it ended like this, Bill, I really am. I stared at the message for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the screen. But I couldn't bring myself to reply. What was there to say? Apologies couldn't fix what was broken, and no amount of regret would bring back the trust we'd lost. So instead, I slid my phone into my pocket and drove away, heading into a future that, for the first time in 2 decades, didn't include her. The first few weeks after the divorce were the hardest. I'd wake up in the morning, expecting to hear Cindy's voice, only to remember I was alone. The house I rented was smaller, quieter, too quiet at times. I kept busy, threw myself into work, and avoided lingering in empty moments, but it was at night, when the silence crept in, that I'd feel at most: the loss, the loneliness, the strange sense of freedom that felt more like being untethered than liberated. There were moments I thought about calling her, out of habit more than anything. I'd catch myself reaching for the phone, wondering what she was doing, and then I'd stop, reminding myself that those days were over. That connection was severed. The finality of it all was sobering. We had built a life together, and now I was left to rebuild one on my own. Part of me was bitter, but another part, a quieter, growing part, felt free. Not free in the way Cindy had wanted, with no boundaries and open doors, but free to rediscover who I was, without her shadow looming over my decisions. It took time, but slowly, that hollow feeling began to fade. Piece by piece, I started putting myself back together. Carol, my assistant, had been pestering me for weeks, ever since the divorce was finalized. Every day, it was the same gentle nudge. "Bill, you really should meet my niece Donna. She's sweet, funny, and gorgeous. Just give her a call. I promise you won't regret it." I'd smile polymer and brush it off. "Carol, I appreciate it, but I'm not ready for that yet." But Carol was persistent, and after weeks of hearing her sing Donna's praises, I finally caved, mostly just to get her off my back. "All right, Carol, I'll give her a call. But if it's awkward, I'm holding you responsible." She grinned triumphantly. "Oh, you'll thank me later, Bill, trust me." Donna and I met at a quiet restaurant a few days later. I wasn't expecting much, honestly. I wasn't expecting anything, but as soon as we started talking, I could feel myself relax. She was 8 years younger than me, recently divorced from a man who had cheated on her, and had an adult daughter. There was an ease about her that I hadn't experienced in years. No games, no pretense, just a real conversation. Donna wasn't drop-dead gorgeous in the way that some people might expect, but she had this warmth, a natural attractiveness that drew me in. Her smile was genuine, and her laugh, the way she listened, made me feel like she was truly interested in what I had to say, something I hadn't felt in a long time. After that first date, I found myself thinking about her more than I'd expected. She wasn't just kind, she was funny in a way that caught me off guard. And she had this fit, trim body that she carried with confidence but without arrogance. We hit it off immediately, and by our third date, things between us took a more intimate turn. We were at her place, sitting close on her couch, sipping wine, when she leaned in and kissed me soft at first, then with a growing intensity that made my pulse quicken. "Bill," she whispered, her lips grazing my ear, "I feel really comfortable with you. It's been a long time since I've felt this way about anyone." I kissed her back, and one thing led to another. She led me upstairs, and the next thing I knew, we were tangled in her sheets. Her body was incredible, firm, toned, and responsive, and the connection between us was electric. That night, lying beside her, I realized how much I'd missed feeling this kind of closeness with someone. Donna had a way of making me feel alive again. There was no heaviness or emotional baggage weighing us down. For the first time in years, I was with someone who didn't carry the past like a burden, and it was liberating. Things progressed naturally from there. Donna and I spent more time together, and soon enough we decided to make a serious step, buying a house together. It wasn't a mansion by any means, but it was perfect for us, a cozy place with a backyard where we could enjoy quiet evenings or host her daughter and friends. It felt right. Like this was the kind of life I should have been living all along. One evening, we sat out on the porch, watching the sunset as Donna's daughter, Emma, came over to join us. She smiled as she sat down, looking between the two of us. "You know, Bill," she said, "Mom's been a lot happier since you came into her life. You've been good for her. I haven't seen her this relaxed in years." I glanced at Donna, who was smiling softly, and squeezed her hand. "She's been good for me too. Emma, better than she realizes." Donna leaned her head against my shoulder, her fingers intertwined with mine. "It's true, you know," she said quietly. "Before I met you, I thought I'd never trust anyone again after my ex. But then you came along, and I don't know, you made me believe in love again." I smiled, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "You did the same for me, Donna. After everything with Cindy, I thought I'd never open up to someone again. But you made it easy." Donna's eyes met mine, and in that moment everything felt so simple, so clear. We didn't need to rush anything or force the relationship into something it wasn't. We were just two people, healing each other, finding joy in the small moments, and building a future that wasn't tied to the past. As the conversation drifted into laughter and lighthearted teasing, I realized just how far I'd come. Donna wasn't a replacement for Cindy, and what we had wasn't a rebound. It was something real, something healthy. And when Donna's daughter made a joke about how long it would take before we got married, we exchanged a knowing smile. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. Donna squeezed my hand and leaned in closer. "You think we should start planning that wedding now?" I grinned and kissed her forehead. "I think we should." And just like that, the weight of the past felt a little lighter. With Donna, I'd found more than just love, I'd found peace.